Smart.
So at the front, this is a situation in June 1915. Theo Bahis was residing at a hotel at La Panne, which was only within 3 miles of both airfields. There was an airfield at Kokzijde with 3 squadrons. There was a new airfield at Houten with 2 squadrons. There was an escadrille, a seaplane squadron, which only consisted of 1 aircraft. It was based at Calais. The pilot of the aircraft was Lieutenant Buug, who was also the squadron commander. Signing the impossible zone of we were a poor country, yes. And then there was a new escadrille formed in France. It was Escadrille C-74. It was known as the Escadrille Franco-Belge. It was created flying in favor of the Belgian army, but still under command of the French army. It consisted of course, a French commanding officer, French pilots, and Belgian observers. And this is the situation in France. Louis Tournay left the actual command of the air park and repair park to Captain Georges Nelis, who was the very first military pilot in Belgium. He was the designer of the GN pusher type two-seater, which we will see more later on. He also did not see the front during the war. The other part of the technical branch was in Maison Bollekens, the factory that built the aircraft for the Belgian army prior to the war. They were able to dismantle their factory in Antwerp in October 1914. They could embark it on a train, everything movable, including the mechanics with their families. They were movable as well. They embarked it on a train and could rebuild the plant of the huge hangar in Calais in France. And they built 72 aircraft for the Belgian army during their 5-year contract, which expired in March 1917. Although it was a civil company, it stood under the command of Tournay because it was incorporated in the technical branch of the military aviation. This brings us to the facts of 1915. There was a reorganization of the army in its air service. There was a re-establishment of the pilot school at Étampes in France. There was a new airfield at Houten, which was right into the garden of Belgian headquarters, and I will show a picture later on. The site of the airfield was chosen by the commanding officer of the first section of general headquarters, because it took too long for the to find a new site, and he decided to put it right there in his garden. Now, after the delivery of the first machine guns in March 1915, the first official aerial victory followed in April 17th. Fernand Jacquet was a pilot, and his observer was Henri Vindevogel. Jacquet was destined to become Belgium's first ace, and the only fireman ace of the war, as well as the most active pilot of the military aviation with 2 less than 200 war flights. Then there were the first handful of fighter aircrafts, which were rather overprotected by headquarters. In June we received 4 Leopard 2-seaters as fighter aircraft, but they were quite expensive for the Belgian army, and they decided when the aircraft could get airborne, which was a rather ridiculous way of flying, because they ordered one of the aircraft spotters in the frontline trenches. If he considered an aircraft to be hostile, he had to call his responsible officer. He had to come out of his dugout, look for the aircraft, identify it as hostile. Then he had to contact headquarters. Headquarters would contact Theo Bahis at La Panne. He would rush out of his office, call for the fighter pilot on duty to take off. So that took quite a long time. By the time they had no mobile phones at the time. By the time that the aircraft was in the air at a reasonable altitude, the hostile aircraft, even though it was a hostile aircraft, was far away from the place it was first sighted, of course. Then there was a photographic service which expanded from 1 to 2 photographers. Night bombing was carried out on a voluntary base. Belgian generals did not like the idea of night bombing because they lived so close to the airfield at Houten. And the aircraft always took off from the airfield of Houten and they feared through pilots from the German army. And then there were the wireless transmitters who were introduced and developed. And in September 1915, late August 1915, the first newborn babies were delivered to the Belgian front. And it didn't take long for the first fighter pilot to score a victory. The second victory of the Belgian army, which was scored by civil pilot Jan Olislagers. This is a picture of Coxhead Airfield. And I don't know if you realize, but you see number 1 squadron, number 2 squadron, number 3 squadron. This is 60% of the entire Belgian air service. And at one time, over here, there was a French squadron, it's category MF36, and here was the naval squadron, but I don't know which number it was. It stayed there from 1915 until 1917. Now the landing ground is still exactly the same. You can actually roam the ground. The only absence you have is there's no hangars left, of course. The building is also still standing there.
One bombing run, they wiped out the whole Belgian Air Force.
Yeah, they could. This is a picture of Houten Airfield. These are the hangars of number 4 squadron. Number 5 squadron was over here facing them. This is general headquarters, so it was really practically right in their garden. This was the mess of the NCO pilots. This was the mess of the officers. But the officers of the Belgian Air Service preferred this cozy little dining room because most of the staff officers, of course, always came there and they did not like each other. Headquarters of the generals was over here, just at the top of the letter M. It is actually, I've been here a few months ago. There's nothing changed. The building is still there. It's now a house. I couldn't get in, of course. This farm is still there. This is still open field, but here there's a little bit more houses now. But the ground, everything is exactly the same as it was left in 1918. Another statistical thing. Out of a total of 2,700 flights, it becomes quite clear that reconnaissance aircraft took the brunt of tasks carried out by the aviation, with more than half of the missions flown. Escort missions were not necessarily, liaison was not done. Surveillance is a little bit the same as reconnaissance. It's a very small difference between those two missions. In 1916 was meant to be a quiet year because of the big offensives in France at the summit at Verdun, which obliged the Germans to move nearly all their squadrons further south. But this implied, of course, that the Belgian Air Service was in control of the air during that time. At the top of the air service, both Baron Mahis and Louis Tournay were discharged. They were replaced by Roman van Krombruggen and Jules Meijers. Both were very portly figures and they were soon nicknamed the two tanks. Both men did not like aircraft, but they had organizing talents. But they were quite unpopular by the aviators because they did not like aircraft. Number 1 squadron was transformed into the first dedicated fighter unit in January. A 6th squadron came into being with the arrival of the BE-2Cs. In late September, number 5 squadron also became a fighter unit. During our control over the skies, we scored 5 aerial victories. 3 of them were claimed by Fernand Jacquet in his Farmentuis. And a new airfield was prepared for the fighter units at Les Mours. And the wireless telephone was introduced and developed. But the most notable feat of the year was the Tanganyika seaplane unit.